Coffee Break, today's tidbit.
All right, it's time for Coffee Break, today's tidbit. And joining us in this studio, as she always does on weekdays, Angela. Angela, hello to you.
Hi, SJ.
Angela.
Yes?
What's our random tidbit today? You thought I was going to ask you a question.
Yeah, I thought you were
very
gonna go.
important question.
No, today's tidbit is like by complete coincidence, you mentioned it in the opening. So there's this Korean movie about Baduk. Yeah, and it's recently become a box office hit here in Korea. And it also got a release on OTT streaming platforms. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it because they were PRing this pretty hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there was pretty big names that were coming out in this
Yes.
particular movie, right?
Yes.
It's a movie. So it was actually a coincidence that
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know you were going to talk about Baduk in the opening. And then,
So you're never reading the scripts that are coming in?
no, like I wrote this before.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. She's a Power J. She does everything ahead of time.
Yeah, so the film I was talking about is called The Match,
Okay.
or 승부 in Korean, which means like the match. No, I was thinking something else, sorry. Yes, the movie opened in theaters on March 26th, and as of late April, it pulled in over 2 million viewers, making it the second most watched Korean film of 2025 so far. And it was just released on a streaming platform on May 8th.
Okay. So this is an interesting one because you might say Baduk, right? It's like the slowest game
Yeah.
ever. And
Like, what's exciting
well, yeah, what's
about-
exciting about this? No, but it gets pretty intense here. Let's talk about what this movie is about.
So this movie is intense. It's not slow. It's a biographical drama based on the true story of two legendary Korean Baduk players named Cho Hoon-hyun and Lee Chang-ho. The movie is set in the early 1990s when the master-student duo dominated the professional Baduk scene in South Korea. And Cho is played by Lee Byung-hun, a very famous and great actor in South Korea. Cho is already a national hero after becoming Korea's first world champion in Baduk, and he takes in Lee Chang-ho, a quiet prodigy, as his disciple. But as the students' skills grow, they eventually face off in a highly anticipated match that flips expectations.
Yeah, so because this movie was such a smash hit,
Yes.
they actually found actual pictures of this battle.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, because what is it? Lee Chang-ho, he's young.
Yes.
He's a young kid, right? And then, his teachers, right? His teacher, Jo Eun, he's like smoking a cigarette in
Yeah.
front of him and everything. He smokes like a couple of packs while
Yeah.
he's like playing Baduk. That's his thing. I understand it was like back in the days, but come on. Can't be doing that in front of a kid here.
There's actually a documentary about the real-life match.
Yeah. I read about it. I read about this battle, so I know what this is all about. But was the film well received?
Yes, so the film's box office success is notable because the film had a rather rocky ride to release.
Yeah.
Because Lee Chang-ho is played by Yoo Ah-in, and he was involved in a drug scandal which delayed the movie's release by almost 2 years. But despite earlier controversies, the movie gained strong word of mouth, and with its OTT release, it's expected to do even better, especially in Asia, where Baduk is still a major cultural game.
Yeah, so again, we talked about cancel culture yesterday with Jerry. Okay, and so he served his time, but you can't take away the fact, number one, Lee Byung-hun, in my opinion, one of the best actors in all of Korea. Yoo Ah-in, again, another great, talented actor. You put them together, this is going to be a masterpiece, right? But for our listeners overseas,
Yes.
what is Baduk? I believe Baduk, the English term is called Go,
Yes,
right?
so it's Go, commonly known in the West, Ego in Japanese, and it has different names. But it's considered the oldest board game still played, and Baduk requires strategic thinking, pattern recognition, and long-term planning. And so it's basically played by two players taking turns placing black and white stones on a 19 by 19 grid, and the goal is to control more territory than your opponent. Have you ever played it before?
I tried to learn it in college because there was a like an anime
Yeah.
based on Go
Yeah.
called Go,
Yeah.
and I tried to learn it, but it's difficult.
Yeah, so the rules itself are simple.
Yeah.
But it takes decades to really master it.
Yeah. So I mean, I played Omok instead, which is like basically
Everyone ends up doing that.
5 in a row. That's what you're
Yeah.
supposed to do. So this is kind of like Korean chess, but not really?
Yeah, not really.
Yeah.
Like, unlike chess, which has defined pieces and movements, Baduk is more abstract. And as I mentioned, mastery takes decades. There are millions of possible moves, and players talk about reading the board several steps ahead. So it's like playing mental 3D chess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like 장기 would be more like chess.
Yes.
Because it actually has actual
like,
pieces
yes,
that move
exactly.
a certain way. But Go is completely different here. And you talked about different moves that are putting in.
Yes.
I mean, you saw AlphaGo versus, Isidore. I mean, he's looking like several, like tens and the dozens of moves ahead of
Exactly.
time. But how popular is it in Korea these days, though?
So Baduk had its ups and downs. The game goes way back like to ancient Goryeo period, but for a long time it was considered something older people played at home or a game that kids with short attention span were trained to play. Yeah. But the turning point for younger audience was definitely Isidore, as you mentioned, because of AlphaGo. Back in 2016, Isidore, one of Korea's best Baduk players, played a 5-game match against the AI system AlphaGo, and he won one of those games. And it became very iconic because it showed human creativity still had a place against AI.
No one was able to beat AlphaGo.
Yes.
I mean, he won once, and that was that one match where they call it 신의 한수, right?
Yes, exactly.
They were like, why do you do that? And it turned out later on why. It's just incredible here. But this, again, if you know how to play it, my dad absolutely loves watching it. I'm just like, why are you getting excited for? What's going on here?
Yeah.
I don't understand it. We're talking about black and white as in Baduk pieces here, but Baduk, it's not just an old, difficult game anymore, right? There's much more than this.
Yeah, and while it still has that image of being really hard and intellectual, Baduk actually shows up in our everyday lives more than we notice.
Okay, tell us how.
So, well, a lot of Korean words we use in daily conversation actually come from Baduk terminology. Did you know that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because, okay, go ahead.
So, 승부수 literally means winning move. It is used when talking about a decisive or bold choice in Baduk. So that comes from Baduk. I think this is more popular. 미생, meaning unfinished life, comes from a Baduk term too. It refers to a group of stones that aren't dead or alive yet.
So for our listeners out there, our program picture, right, with 3 people, me and the pretty little SJ and pretty old SJ. That idea actually came from the drama 미생.
Yes.
And so when we're having meetings, I was telling our producer, I was like, well, but what's mi생? And he's like, it's actually a terminology in Baduk. And I was like,
You haven't watched 미생?
no.
Oh, then that's why you don't know.
Yeah, but they were saying since you don't work, you're not an office worker, you won't understand what goes on.
No, but 미생 is...
It's good drama.
It's used in the drama to explain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so mi생 is the title of a famous Korean drama about office life. And the main character Changgure used to be a Baduk player before entering corporate life. And the show uses these Baduk metaphors throughout to highlight office politics and decision making. Yeah, so it's a great example of how deeply the game's language and philosophy are embedded in Korean culture.
Again, Baduk does show up in Korean media quite often, but considering, again, such a difficult game, such an old game, why do you think it pops up so much?
Well, I think it's partly because Baduk, is a great metaphor for life, strategy, and conflict. And we've been talking about how it's a slow game, but every move in the game has weight. And that makes a great tool for storytelling, especially when characters are dealing with power struggles, inner dilemmas, or long-term rivalries.
So it's a big part of Korean culture.
Yeah. It's so embedded in Korean culture. People get the metaphors without difficulty and without even actually noticing it. And I think it also explains why movies like The Match can do so well, even with such a niche subject.
Is there any other shows, like I talked about Go, but that's a Japanese anime. But is there any shows or movies besides like Miseng or that talks about or uses Baduk in this way?
Yeah, so you've probably heard about this. Another great example is the film The Divine Move or 신의 한수.
And that was the term that was used so often when Isidore beat AlphaGo.
Yeah, exactly.
They called it 신의 한수, right?
Because 신의 한수 is also a Baduk term. This movie is more of a noir action movie where Baduk is both the theme and the battleground. The main character seeks revenge after a rigged Baduk match leads to its brother's death. And so while it's heavily fictional and stylized, it's still based around the logic and spirit of the game.
Guys, look at how serious they are.
Yeah.
The brother's death.
Yeah.
Brother died because of a rigged
Baduk. Because of a Baduk game. Yeah.
Man, I mean, come on now. This is pretty intense, right?
And even in shows where Baduk isn't the focus, like Sungbo or Shinee Hansu, it sometimes pops up as a motive. For example, in the drama The Glory. You've watched that?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so in The Glory, Baduk becomes a symbolic and strategic element in the revenge plot, as Moon Do-won, played by Song Ye-kyo, says she likes the game because it's essentially taking away your opponent's house. Yeah, so it's a great metaphor. And so even if you don't play the game, you can feel the tension the game itself brings.
John over in DC says this whole topic is making me think about Reply 1988. That's right. Park Bo-gum.
Yes.
Park Bo-gum played. He was actually based on Lee Se-dor.
Yes.
The image and stuff like that. I mean, he doesn't look like Lee Se-dor, obviously, but that kind of image, his persona was based on Lee Se-dor. So I was actually thinking the same thing there, John. But again, we talk about the popularity of Baduk here in Korea, but again, it's the popularity spreads to other Asian countries.
Exactly. And, with the match now on streaming platforms, the global audience is getting exposed to Baduk more. And plus, Baduk is already quite popular in other Asian countries like Japan, Taiwan, and China. So the movie has a built-in cultural resonance outside of South Korea as well.
I remember how popular Baduk was in Asia. They actually made this into an Asian game competition.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
So, tidbit of information, Baduk was an official game that was played in the Asian Games in 2010 and 2022.
And this is, it was pretty intense.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people, like how there's like rivalry with like, Korea and like the countries and stuff like that. When it got to Baduk, it's very intense.
Yes.
Especially like Korea-China rivalry is some next level stuff there. Yeah, and so we talk about Baduk as a whole and the competitive nature, but it's coming back again. I mean, when it feels like we've forgotten about how popular Baduk is, it kind of inches back into Korea once again.
Yeah, and I think it really is trending because like Lee Se-dor is now on a on another show called The Devil's Plan.
That's right.
Yeah. And, it's getting a lot of exposure these days. For instance, the opening was about Baduk by coincidence. So, yeah, it's inching its way back into our lives, because I think it reflects how, modern people approach life, relationships, change, a lot of whole thing.
Yeah.
And in the fast-paced digital world we live in, there's something refreshing about a game that forces you to slow down and just think.
My dad keeps telling me to get my son to go to like a Baduk academy or something like that.
A lot of adults say that.
I was like, stop it. Anyways, good stuff here. I'm going to still try to learn Baduk. I still don't fully understand. Until then, I'm going to have to start playing. I have to keep playing Omok. Angela, thank you very much for all your tidbits throughout the week. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you again on Monday.
See you next week.
I hope you enjoyed that segment on the Culture Inc. If you want to hear more and other great segments on our show, you can tune into Arirang Radio every day from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea Standard Time.